Hi, welcome back to MacArthur Performance. This video will be a continuation of the videos on the 350 Chevrolet, short blocking it. This video will contain me pin fitting and hanging the pistons and putting in soft plugs and can bearings. Okay, we're going to set up the pin vise. Got the gauge zeroed in so the fingers are true. Do that with a precision ring. I showed similar to the rod but smaller. So we have this set up somewhat, rougher in a little bit, get her a little closer there. Now it's set. So now we're going to check the press fit, see where we're at. Take a little bit more off this one here. Let the rest soaking in the parts washer. I'll take them out here in a minute. If you get the press too tight, you might not get the pin in. If you get it too loose, the pin might come out. So anything under 1,000, I get a little nervous. You can get away with about 7/10 with a press. Well, they say 8/10, 7 to 8/10. Anything under 1,000, I get a little bit concerned about. So you might have a problem getting them off if they're too tight. These were almost, some of these are almost 2,000 press. That's a little bit too much. I'll put them on. You can really screw up a lot of things. You got to be very careful if you're pressing them on. I use an oven, so we're looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to sand the sides of the rods a little bit, wash them up, get the oil off of them, and hang the pistons. Everything looks pretty decent. I'll take this one out a little bit more. Okay, I guess we're set to hang them. Rods are all washed. I lightly lap the sides of them. I've got a precision block. I've got some 80 grit stick it, and I just go over them lightly in a crisscross fashion. I'm not trying to take any metal off the sides of the rods, just trying to make sure there ain't no high spots. So we've got the rod oven all set up. I'm gonna have to heat the coil up. I do one at a time. I know it's got 2 holes, but I like doing them one at a time, so I'm not in a rush. So I also have it set up so when I push the pin in with the rod, it'll come all the way to the end of the pin boss. It'll set there, and then when it cools off in that, it'll be centered. I've got my adjustable stop all set up. I'll pull the pin halfway out, just enough so I can get the rod in there. I'll set the rod in there. I've got it marked for position forward, and on the rod, tangs on the outside of the oil pan rail on a big block and a small block, excuse me, Chevrolet. So we're all set to go. I'll cycle this a couple times. We should be ready to put a rod on, hang a rod. So usually the first rod is the trickiest one because you got to make sure the oven's heated up. So we'll give her a whirl. Okay, I try to keep them below blue. I know some guys might comment on that, but usually brown. So I'll hit them with a little bit of oil and I'll move that one off to the side and I'll get the next one ready. Relatively happy with where the pin is in the rod, so now I try to keep an eye on them. I usually like to get them out around brown. I don't like to get them past blue. The small end of the pin, the rod, the thinnest part, sometimes they turn a little bit blue, but you don't want to try to get them past purple. Well, they're all hung and I got them in the box and bagged. We'll usually have pretty good luck with this. I've been using it for probably over 10 years. Put it on with my finger. Probably shouldn't do that, but you know, I don't have no rubber gloves, so I'm gonna go around and of course I wiped them first with lacquer thinner and they're not clean, so you want to make sure you get them all nice and clean. Put a nice light coat on it, make sure that it's all the way around the hole. Light bead on the plug. A little goes a long ways, and stuff's expensive, but I got an old aluminum driver I made up years ago. You can tell it's got some miles on it. Had to fire up the old lathe and do a little trimming on my old aluminum driver there. Um, maybe somebody will question why I'm putting 620 Loctite on these. A lot of the older blocks, sometimes if the plug isn't in straight, or just over the years, if it's got steel plugs in it, they'll erode and they'll start etching into the block and you'll have pits. And this usually takes care of probably about 99% of the problem. So this is kind of like killing two birds with one stone, so to speak. So I kind of like to do it. You don't have to worry about them pushing out. I know guys use silicone, aviation, Permatex. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do it. This is the way I do it. So, um, once they're in, they really don't normally go anywhere. So we're gonna put these in, put a light coat on the outside of the plug. Got this machine down so it's got a stop built into it. It usually puts them right exactly where they need to be. Okay, we'll do the other side. Okay, so I'll spare you the time watching me put the front plugs in. I'll get back to you when we start installing the cam plug. Okay, so I'm going to prep the cam bearings, but before I go into the cam bearings, I'd like to mention one thing about soft plugs. The newer brass soft plugs aren't as thick as the old ones. I have some older soft plugs. They're newer ones, you got to be real careful with them. They're very thin. You want to make sure you drive them straight. I'll leave that there, but you got to be careful with them. Just like everything else nowadays, everything's kind of, well, I hate to be negative, but it's turning into crap. If you look at this cam bearing, it's a brand new cam bearing. I don't know if you can see that or not. They've X'd over the numbers on the cam bearing. So they've tried to remove the numbers on the cam bearing. The cam bearing position number has been remarked. It's up there. Let's see if we can get it. Oh, it's up here, right there. It's up here. Okay, now I marked the cam bearings before I put them in. Now I've bought 3 sets of these cam bearings. The finish on them's okay. I hesitate to use the name of the manufacturer. Like everybody else, you really got to watch the stuff. It's disgusting. What can I say? So I remarked them. I won't get into any more of that. And I do this, and I think you've seen me do it. I take it, I'll break the edge off of it. It's got a chamfer on it, still has an edge on it. So I break that edge off there so it doesn't get pushed through when I put the cam in, and it doesn't start a high spot. And I take my deburring tool and I use the smooth end of it, the back side of it I should say, and I just walk it around lightly. I'm not taking off a lot of material, I'm just breaking the edge, and I'm going around that cam bearing. I'm taking my finger, making sure it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, I'll just take a light swipe with it. Okay, that cam bearing's ready to go. So, and I also numbered them for position because there's 2 positions that they've done that to, and if you've got older eyes and you can't see, or you don't have very strong eyes to begin with, I mean, I had a hell of a time finding it. So I just after I find it, I put the number of the position on it. Now we'll put the cam bearings in. So I always pretty much have a hard time showing the video of me putting cam bearings in without me being in the way of driving them. Okay, they got a new tool out that you can hydraulically push them in. I've driven them for years. I'm sure that hydraulic tool is nice, but they do make a hydraulic tool that actually pushes them in. I was going to take some Acme thread and make one where I'd press them in, but on the Chevrolet small block, they're grooved, fully grooved, so you can put the oiling holes really wherever you want. I usually offset them to around 4 to the 3 position, and that way it ramps the oil in. So, and you know, you can put them anywhere you want. It doesn't really matter, but I don't particularly care to line the oiling holes up with the cam on the small block. That's all I'll say. Everybody's got their own way of doing it, so you do it any way you want, but that's the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to start out driving number 5, and then I'm going to go all the way up to number 3, turn the tool around, and do number 1. And like I said, it's really hard to get in here and show you, but basically I put a little bit of light oil on the housing bore, and just tap them in. And you want to make sure that when you're driving that your tool doesn't go and hit the block. The back one's got to go in quite a ways, usually further than the housing that it's machined in, because the oil hole don't line up. What I have is I use a little piece of welding rod with a bent hook on it, and I go in and I make sure that the oiling hole for the cam bearing is in the groove. I know right now that this one is not, but you want to also make sure that if you have this style of tool with a boot on it, there's two different styles of boot. One's a little thicker than the other, you can see. Being that you have to drive that one further into the housing bore, you may want to put the orange boot on it. You can back it off, but if you back it off, there's a good chance that it'll jump over the cam bearing and destroy it. So I'm going to put them in. I'll probably try to show you a picture of me installing maybe the last one, but typically that's the way that I do them. And then I check to make sure. I'll bend a little. I've got a piece of welding rod, I'll bend a 90 on it, and I'll just stick it up in the oil hole, make sure that I'm in the groove for the oiling. You don't want to deny the oiling. Bad things can happen. So we'll get going on it. Okay, and you can use one of these mirrors, and if we put the mirror in here, you can see that we're in the center of the groove. Now if you look, this cam bearing's past the step for that plug. You damn well don't put the plug all the way down in the back of one of these blocks. It'll rub on the back of the cam and it'll make metal. You only drive the cam plug in as far as you need to till it's flush. That's what I do. You got to be careful of this. You know, you want to make sure that you're getting oil. So I use this tool here, if I can find it here, right there. I use that when I can't get the mirror. So I put them off to the side a little bit, around 3 to 4 like I said. And how I do that is I look down the side of the block and I pick a point where I think it's close, and then I kind of line them all up. There's a casting line here, and then I figure out I go down about 3/8 of an inch from that casting line right there. If you can see that, it's the casting line for the where the sleeve starts. Then I go down about 3/8 of an inch. And I put my finger in there and I line it up. If it's somewhere around anywhere from 3 to 5, it's okay. You know, 6 isn't really where you want to be, but you know, they run hundreds and thousands of miles going that way. Original way. Okay, piece of paper towel here so I don't drag on the bearing. When I put the driver through it, hold it like that, run it through like this. Pull it back, the driver on. This will be for number 1. Didn't do that, but there we go. Good. It's in the center of my groove. Good. When I'm done, I'm going to start out with a good cam, a new cam, or a cam, you know, that I know that's a core cam that isn't bent. And I'm going to make sure it fits in there before I put the plug in or anything else. Before I do building the engine, you always want to make sure that your cam bearings, that you can put a cam through it. If you can't put a cam through it, you're going to have to figure out where the high spots are, and you can scrape them. And that's the only way I know how to take care of that problem. I have the cam that I'm going to be putting in this engine. It's brand new. It's got some cosmoline still on it. I just wiped the main journals off to make sure they would fit. Wouldn't hurt to have a little oil on it, but we're taking it back out and just want to make sure it fits. So it definitely is coming back out to get washed and oiled. Okay, it fits and it turns by hand. You want it to turn by hand. If it don't turn by hand, figure out where it's rubbing. Usually it'll be a shiny spot on the cam bearing. And take a cam bearing tool and a babbitt tool and lightly scrape. You can buy a babbitt scraper and you knock the handle off of it and you weld a piece of tubing on it. This is what bought a babbitt scraper, welded a tube on it, so I extended the reach. Okay, we're going to talk about gears first. Okay, so we're talking about installing the cam plug, which would be the last thing that we would do after checking the cam to make sure that it turns freely. We know it turns freely, so we're going to put the plug in. I mentioned you don't want to put the plug in too far. Here's a couple timing chain sets with the top gear, top gear. This is a conventional Chevrolet earlier cam shaft, and this would be a late model step nose, smaller diameter for the bolt pattern because it's a step nose. Okay, now if you're worried about the back cam plug rubbing, all you have to do is if you put the cam all the way to the back of the block with this style here, the early style, it's not going to rub because the cam's going to pull up that, say 70s, whatever, 60 thousandths. It's all at 60 thousandths. It's going to pull up. So it's going to pull it away from the cam plug. And this is going to do the same thing, except you're going to have a retaining plate on it. So, if you put the cam all the way back to where it's nosed, where it's cut down for the short nose or the small nose cam, it's at the end of the day, and I'm getting tired. And you pull up the cam up against this plate, which is the retaining plate, and it don't rub, you'll be all right. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. You can put the back plug in too far, obviously. And, there's a chance that it's probably not going to rub because you're pulling the cam forward. But if you push the cam all the way back and it's less than this dimension here, and it's less than half the dimension here, it's probably never going to rub. And on this one here, you just pull it forward until it hits the thrust plate. And if it doesn't rub, it isn't going to rub. There's very little room back there. I've seen it happen. There's a lot of different styles. I brought this one out. This is a Torrington. This is an earlier style one. This is a step nose, obviously, because of the retaining plate. Because it's a roller cam, there's nothing keeping the cam from going forward and backwards except the front cover and the gear without this, or a thrust button. But I don't want to get too far into that. And there's different setups for this. There's solid bronze or Torrington. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. You want to always make sure that you use the right cam plug. It's shallow. On some racing blocks like Donovan and that, you got to be careful with this, but that's a whole nother story. And if you're not building Donovan engines, I'm not going to bring it up. I'll just leave it there. I don't want to over confuse or make the video any more difficult than it needs to be. So, if you got anything out of this, hit the like button. Please subscribe. It doesn't cost nothing. Thanks for watching.